The conference hall floated in the darkness of space, a massive structure that had witnessed 3,000 years of galactic history. Inside, representatives from 47 different species gathered around a circular table that seemed to stretch forever. The air was thick with tension. Something had changed in the galaxy, and nobody knew what it meant. Hyunwoo sat in his designated chair, feeling very small among the giants and ancients that surrounded him. He was Earth's ambassador, one of only 3 humans allowed in the Galactic Council chambers. Most species considered humans to be newcomers, barely worth noticing. They had only joined the galactic community 200 years ago, and in cosmic terms, that was nothing more than a blink. The High Arbiter stood at the center of the room. Velmoth was old, perhaps the oldest being in the known galaxy. His insect-like body was covered in ceremonial robes, and his multiple eyes scanned the room with an expression that might have been fear. Hyunwoo had never seen the Arbiter look afraid before. "The beacon has awakened," Velmoth announced, his voice somehow reaching every corner of the vast chamber. After 50,000 years of silence, the warning system of the predecessor civilization has activated. A hologram appeared above the table. It showed a distant sector of space far beyond the outer rim of known territory. A pulsing red light marked the location of something that should not exist. "What does it warn us about?" asked one of the reptilian delegates, her scales shifting colors with anxiety. Velmoth's mandibles clicked together slowly. "The returned ones," he said simply. The room erupted into chaos. Species that Hyunwoo had never seen show emotion suddenly began talking over each other, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sound, light, and telepathic noise. He pressed his hands against his temples, trying to filter out the mental chatter. "Silence," Velmoth commanded, and the room obeyed instantly. "I know what you're thinking. I know what you fear. The ancient texts spoke of this day, and we all hoped it would never come." Hyunwoo raised his hand, a very human gesture that seemed almost childish in this assembly. "Forgive me, High Arbiter, but what are the returned ones? Earth's records contain no mention of them." Several delegates turned to look at him with what he interpreted as pity. Velmoth's eyes focused on the human ambassador, and for a moment, Hyunwoo felt as if the ancient being was looking straight through him. "Of course your records would not contain this history," Velmoth said softly. "The returned ones existed long before your species discovered fire. They were the terror of the galaxy, a species so violent, so adaptable, so relentlessly expansive that it took an alliance of 200 civilizations to stop them." The hologram changed, showing ancient images carved in stone and metal. Hyunwoo saw depictions of war, of worlds burning, of ships filling the sky like locusts. And in the center of it all, he saw figures that looked disturbingly familiar. They stood on 2 legs, had 2 arms, and possessed a shape that made his heart beat faster. "They conquered everything they touched," continued Velmoth. "No species could match their ferocity in battle. No technology could stay ahead of their ability to adapt and improve. They did not seek coexistence. They sought dominance, and they nearly achieved it." "What happened to them?" Hyunwoo asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. "The allied civilizations made a terrible choice," Velmoth said. "They could not kill the returned ones. Every attempt at genocide failed because the species simply evolved around every weapon, every disease, every trap. So instead, the predecessors used their most advanced technology to imprison them." The hologram showed a single star system, isolated and surrounded by a shimmer of energy. They were stripped of their technology, their memories, their very genetic potential. The predecessors locked away the genes that made them so dangerous, reducing them to primitives. Then they were placed in a quarantine system, surrounded by a barrier that nothing could penetrate. The plan was to keep them there forever, to let them live out their existence in ignorance of what they once were. "But the beacon activated," said the reptilian delegate. "The barrier has failed." "Yes," Velmoth confirmed. 200 years ago, our sensors detected unusual fluctuations in the barrier zone. We investigated but found nothing conclusive. Now we know the truth. The barrier collapsed, and the returned ones have been free for 2 centuries. Hyunwoo felt cold. 200 years ago was exactly when Earth had achieved spaceflight. It was when humanity had suddenly begun advancing at an unprecedented rate, going from primitive aircraft to interstellar vessels in less than 3 generations. Every scientist on Earth called it the Great Acceleration, a period of innovation that seemed almost miraculous. We must locate them before they regain their full strength, declared a crystalline being whose voice sounded like breaking glass. If they remember what they were, if their genetic locks break completely, they will come for us with all the rage of 50,000 years of imprisonment. The council voted unanimously. The combined fleets would mobilize immediately. Every military ship, every defense platform, every weapon system would be prepared. They would find the returned ones and contain them permanently, using force if necessary. After the session ended, Hyunwoo rushed to the archives. He had to be wrong. The coincidence was too perfect, too terrible to be real, but as he searched through the ancient star charts, his hands began to shake. The quarantine system that Velmuth had shown on the hologram matched exactly with Sol. The star that the ancient texts called the prison sun was Earth's own star. The world where the returned ones had been imprisoned was Earth itself. Humanity was not a young species taking its first steps into the galaxy. Humanity was the monster that the entire galaxy feared would return. On Earth, in a research station on Europa, a xenoarchaeologist named Ji-Wan was making her own discovery. She had been studying strange ruins found beneath the ice, structures that predated any known civilization. The symbols on the walls had finally been translated, and what they said made her blood run cold. "Welcome home, children of Terra," the inscription read. "Your exile is ended. Rise and reclaim what was taken from you." Ji-Wan looked at her reflection in the ice. She saw a human face staring back, and for the first time in her life, she wondered what else might be looking out through those eyes. What memories were locked away in her genes? What instincts were waiting to awaken? In orbit above Earth, the defense satellites detected something unusual. Ships were gathering at the edge of the solar system. Lots of ships. More ships than Earth had ever seen in one place. The galaxy had found the returned ones, and it was coming to make sure they never rose again. Ji-Wan stared at the holographic display in her laboratory, her mind refusing to accept what her eyes were seeing. The symbols she had translated from the Europa ruins were now being cross-referenced with similar findings from Mars, Titan, and even buried deep beneath Earth's own ocean floors. The pattern was undeniable and terrifying. "This can't be right," she whispered, but her assistant Kyung-soo shook his head. "I've checked the translations 17 times, he said quietly. "I even had the quantum computers verify every symbol independently. It's all consistent, Ji-Wan. These ruins are 50,000 years old, and they're all human in origin." On Earth, emergency meetings were being called in every major government. Hyunwoo had sent his findings from the council archives, and now the truth was spreading like wildfire through Earth's leadership. In Geneva, the World Assembly had been in continuous session for 48 hours. Admiral Young-sik stood before the assembly, his uniform crisp despite the fact that he had not slept in 2 days. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the evidence that Ji-Wan's team had compiled from sites across the solar system. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was about to say. "We are not who we think we are. Humanity did not evolve naturally on Earth. We were put here as prisoners." The assembly hall erupted in protests and denials, but Young-sik continued speaking over the noise. "The genetic evidence is conclusive. 50,000 years ago, someone altered human DNA on a massive scale. They locked away genes, suppressed abilities, and essentially reduced our ancestors to a primitive state. Then they placed us on Earth and sealed the planet inside an impenetrable barrier." Minister Daun, head of Earth's diplomatic corps, stepped forward. Her face was pale but composed. "The archaeological evidence supports this," she said. "We have found shipyards on Mars capable of constructing vessels we still cannot build today. We have found terraform stations on every planet and moon in our system. We have found weapons platforms that dwarf our most powerful military installations. All of it human. All of it ancient, but why?" someone shouted from the assembly floor. "Why would anyone do this to us?" Ji-Wan's face appeared on the screen via video link from Europa. "Because we were conquerors," she said simply. "The ancient records are very clear about this. 50,000 years ago, humanity controlled half the galaxy. We were not explorers or traders. We were an empire, and we nearly destroyed every other species we encountered." The silence in the assembly hall was absolute. "The genetic modifications were not just meant to weaken us," Ji-Wan continued. "They were meant to change us fundamentally. The coalition of species that defeated us realized they could not kill us all. Every time they tried, we adapted and survived. So instead, they tried something else. They tried to make us forget. They tried to make us incapable of the violence that had made us so dangerous. Captain Taman of Earth's newest warship, the Indomitable, was watching the broadcast from his bridge. Around him, his crew sat in shocked silence. They had joined the Space Force to explore and protect. Now they were learning that their ancestors had been monsters. "Sir," his tactical officer spoke up. "We're receiving reports from the outer sensor network. Multiple contacts entering the solar system. Configuration matches Council military vessels." Taman felt his stomach drop. "How many?" "Current count is over 2,000 ships, sir, and more are arriving every minute." Back on Earth, Admiral Youngsik was receiving the same reports. He looked at Minister Daun and she nodded grimly. They both knew what this meant. "The Council is not coming to talk," Youngsik said to the Assembly. "They're coming to contain us permanently." In orbit above Mars, Jiwan was still making discoveries. The shipyards had begun to activate the moment she had stepped inside them. Ancient systems were coming online, responding to her DNA signature like a key fitting into a lock. The facility's central computer had been waiting for 50,000 years, and now it was eager to share its knowledge. "Dr. Jiwan," the computer's voice spoke in perfect Korean, which should have been impossible. "The awakening protocols have begun. Human genetic locks are degrading at an accelerated rate. Within 6 months, all restrictions will be removed naturally." "What does that mean?" Jiwan asked, though she feared she already knew. "It means humanity will return to its original form," the computer replied. "The modifications were designed to last only 50,000 years. The species that imprisoned you believed that by the time the locks failed, humanity would have evolved beyond its violent nature through natural cultural development. Have we?" Jiwan whispered. "That remains to be determined," the computer said. "However, I must inform you that the facility's defense systems are detecting multiple hostile vessels entering Sol system. The threat assessment indicates a full-scale military invasion is imminent." On the bridge of the Indomitable, alarms were blaring. The number of Council ships had reached 10,000 and was still climbing. Earth's entire defense fleet numbered only 300 vessels, most of them small patrol craft never designed for real combat. Taman opened a channel to Fleet Command. "Admiral, requesting permission to engage defensive positions." Youngsik's face appeared on the screen, and for a moment Taman saw something strange in the Admiral's eyes. They looked sharper somehow, more focused. "Permission granted, Captain. All ships are to take defensive positions around Earth. We will not fire first, but we will defend our world." Around Earth, 300 ships moved into position. They were outnumbered 30 to 1. Facing species with technology hundreds of years more advanced than their own. By every tactical calculation, they had no chance of survival. But something strange was happening to the human crews. Taman felt it first as a tingling in his mind, like a door opening that he had never known was closed. His thoughts became clearer, faster. He looked at the tactical display and suddenly understood patterns and strategies that should have been beyond his training. Across the fleet, other captains were experiencing the same thing. Pilots found their reaction times increasing. Gunners discovered they could predict enemy movements before they happened. Engineers instinctively understood alien technology they had never studied. The genetic locks were breaking faster than the ancient computer had predicted. The presence of an existential threat was triggering something primal in human DNA, something that had been sleeping for 50,000 years. Jiwan watched her own hands with a mixture of fascination and horror. She had just performed a complex calculation in her head that should have required a quantum computer. She had designed a defensive weapon system in minutes that her team had been struggling with for months. "What are we becoming?" she asked the ancient computer. "You are becoming what you always were," it replied. "The question is whether you will make the same choices your ancestors made, or whether 50,000 years of exile has taught humanity something new." Minister Daun stood in the command center, watching the Council fleet take positions around the solar system. She had just received a communication from Hyunwoo on the Council station. His message was brief and clear. They will not negotiate. They remember what humanity was, and they will not risk us becoming that again. I'm sorry. She looked at the faces of the men and women around her, at Admiral Youngsik and Captain Taman on the screens, at Jiwan's image from Mars. They were all changing, all awakening to something that had been stolen from them millennia ago. The question was not whether they could fight. The genetic memory was returning, and with it came the knowledge of how to wage war on a galactic scale. The question was whether they should. Pilot Jae-hoon had been flying combat simulators since he was 16 years old. He knew every maneuver, every tactic, every trick in the manual. But what was happening to him now was not in any manual. He sat in the cockpit of his fighter, part of a wing assigned to protect the Indomitable, and he could feel every other pilot in his squadron. Not through radio communication, but through something deeper. He knew where they were, what they were thinking, how they would move before they moved. It was like they were all parts of the same organism. "Gold Squadron, this is Gold Leader," he said into his comm. But even as he spoke, he realized the words were unnecessary. His pilots already knew what he wanted them to do. They moved into formation with perfect precision, not because they followed his orders, but because they shared his intent. On Earth, in a military research facility, scientist Minji was watching something impossible happen. She had taken blood samples from soldiers in active duty, and the genetic structure was changing in real time. The lock sequences that had been dormant for 50,000 years were activating, rewriting themselves, optimizing. "This is evolutionary change that should take millions of years," she said to her colleague, her voice shaking. "It's happening in hours. The human body is remembering something and forcing itself to return to that state." General Subin stood in the war room, looking at tactical displays that showed the Council fleet surrounding Sol System. She had graduated top of her class in military strategy. But the thoughts flowing through her mind now were beyond anything she had learned. She could see the entire battlefield as if from above, could predict enemy movements 3 steps ahead, could identify weaknesses in formations that should have been impenetrable. "They're using the Karthesh containment pattern," she said suddenly, pointing at the display. "It's designed to prevent any ship from escaping. They'll tighten the net slowly, using their numbers to exhaust our defenses before they close in for the final strike." Admiral Young-sik looked at her sharply. "How do you know that?" Subin opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. She did not know how she knew. The knowledge was just there, as if she had always known it. As if her ancestors had fought against this exact tactic 10,000 times before. "It doesn't matter how I know," she said finally. "What matters is I know how to break it." On the Indomitable, Captain Taemin was experiencing his own awakening. He looked at the ship's systems and suddenly understood them on a level that went beyond engineering. He could feel the ship's energy flows, could sense inefficiencies, could see ways to improve performance that should not be possible with Earth's current technology. "Engineering," he said into the comm. "Reroute auxiliary power through the secondary manifolds and increase the resonance frequency by 0.7%. "Sir," the chief engineer replied, confusion evident in her voice. "That configuration isn't in our specifications. It shouldn't even be possible with our current systems." "Trust me," Taemin said, and found himself adding, "It's an old design, older than you can imagine." The engineer followed his instructions, and the ship's power output increased by 15%. Systems that had been struggling to maintain battle readiness suddenly operated at peak efficiency. It was as if the ship itself was remembering what it was supposed to be. Ambassador Hyun-woo watched helplessly from the council station as the fleet prepared to attack. He had tried everything, had begged the council to reconsider, had pleaded for time to find a peaceful solution. But the ancient species remembered what humanity had been, and they would not take chances. "They're afraid," Hyun-woo said to himself. "They're so afraid that they can't see we're not the same species anymore." But even as he said it, he wondered if it was true. Reports were coming from Earth about the changes happening to every human. They were becoming stronger, faster, smarter. The question was whether they would also become more violent. On Mars, Ji-won was deep inside the ancient shipyard, and what she found there made her heart race with equal parts excitement and terror. The facility was not just a construction site. It was a library, a repository of 50,000 years of human military knowledge. "You need to see this, Kyung-soo," she said into her comm. "The database contains records of every war humanity ever fought before the exile. Every tactic, every weapon, every strategy that made our ancestors so dangerous. And it's all being uploaded to Earth's military network. Can you stop it?" Kyung-soo asked. Ji-won tried to shut down the transfer, but the system would not respond to her commands. "It's automatic," she said. "The facility detected the council fleet, identified it as a threat, and initiated combat protocols. It's trying to help us by turning us back into the monsters we used to be." Kyung-soo said quietly. The countdown to the Council's attack reached 12 hours. The fleet had finished its deployment and was now waiting for a signal from High Arbiter Velmoth. The ancient being stood on his command ship looking at the blue-green planet that hung in the void. I remember your ancestors, he said, though no one else was in the room to hear. I remember how they fought, how they refused to surrender even when defeat was certain. I remember how many of my people died trying to stop them. Forgive me, but I cannot let that happen again. He gave the order and the fleet began to move inward. On Earth, alarms sounded across every continent. The civilian population was being evacuated to underground shelters, though everyone knew the shelters would not save them if the Council truly wanted to destroy the planet. This was not about survival. This was about dignity. Jae-hoon and his squadron launched from the Indomitable, joining hundreds of other fighters in the space around Earth. They were hopelessly outnumbered, facing an enemy with thousands of years of technological advantage. But as Jae-hoon gripped his controls, he felt no fear. Instead, he felt something that disturbed him more than fear. He felt anticipation. He felt eager. Some deep part of him wanted this fight, had been waiting for this fight for 50,000 years. Gold Squadron, he said, and his voice was steady and cold. Weapons free, show them what we are. The squadron moved as one, diving toward the advancing Council ships with a coordination that no human force had ever displayed before. They did not fly like Earth pilots following tactics developed over 2 centuries of spaceflight. They flew like an ancient species that had perfected the art of war over millions of years. General Subin watched the battle display with growing unease. The Earth forces were fighting with impossible skill. Ships that should have been destroyed were dodging attacks at the last possible moment. Pilots were making maneuvers that should have killed them from the G-forces alone, but somehow survived. The Council fleet was taking casualties, real casualties, against a force they had expected to sweep aside in minutes. We're winning, said one of her officers, disbelief clear in his voice. No, Subin said quietly. We're awakening, and if we're not careful, we'll become exactly what they fear we are. On the Indomitable, Taemin stared at his tactical display and made a decision. His ship could reach the Council command vessel. His weapons could potentially destroy it. One strike, and the entire Council fleet would fall into disarray. His hand moved toward the firing control, guided by instincts that were 50,000 years old, and then he stopped. In that moment, Captain Taemin understood what was happening to his species. They were being given back everything that had been taken from them. The strength, the speed, the tactical genius, the perfect coordination, all the tools that had made them the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever seen. But they were also being given back the instincts that had turned them into monsters, although ships, he said into the fleet-wide channel, his voice cutting through the chaos of battle. Ceasefire. Fall back to defensive positions around Earth. Do not pursue. I repeat, do not pursue. The command went against every tactical instinct that was screaming in his head, but it was the right command. It was the human command, not the ancient one. The question was whether the rest of the fleet would obey. The Council fleet did not expect Earth's forces to retreat. They expected a fight to the death, the kind of savage battle that the ancient humans had been famous for. When the Earth ships pulled back and formed a defensive sphere around their home planet, confusion rippled through the Council ranks. High Arbiter Velmoth stared at his tactical display with his ancient eyes, trying to understand what he was seeing. The human forces had been winning. Their fighters had torn through his advanced squadrons with terrifying efficiency. His casualty reports showed losses that should have been impossible against such a numerically inferior force. And then, they had simply stopped and retreated. It's a trick, his tactical officer insisted. They're trying to lure us closer to their defense platforms. But Velmoth was not so sure. He had fought the ancient humans before millennia ago when he was young and the galaxy was a different place. He remembered their battle fury, their absolute refusal to show weakness or mercy. The old humans would never have retreated from a winning position. Perhaps these new humans were different after all. On the Indomitable, Captain Taemin was facing a near mutiny. Half his bridge crew was arguing against his retreat order, their voices sharp with frustration and anger that felt foreign to their normal personalities. Sir, we had them, his weapons officer protested. We could have broken their formation. We could have forced them to withdraw, and then what? Taemin asked calmly. though he felt the same battle rage burning in his own chest. We pursue them. We attack their homeworlds. We become exactly what they think we are. We become what we were always meant to be, the officer shot back, and for a moment his eyes had a distant look, as if he was seeing memories from another life. Taemin understood because he felt it too. The genetic memories were flooding back, showing him battles fought in star systems that no longer existed, victories won and empires conquered. It would be so easy to give in to those instincts, to let the ancient warrior take over. No, he said firmly. We were meant to be better than that. That's why we spent 50,000 years learning how to be human instead of just warriors. In the war room on Earth, General Subin was coordinating the defensive positions while simultaneously fighting against her own tactical instincts. Her mind kept showing her ways to strike back, weak points in the council formation, strategies that would let Earth's small fleet punch far above their weight. General, Minister Dayun's voice came through the comm. The council is requesting communication. High Arbiter Velmoth wants to speak with our leadership. Subin felt surprise cut through the battle haze in her mind. They want to talk? It seems our retreat confused them, Dayun replied. They expected us to fight like our ancestors did. When we didn't, it made them reconsider their assumptions. The communication channel opened and Velmoth's alien face appeared on the main screen. The ancient being looked tired, his multiple eyes dimmed with something that might have been sadness. I am old, Velmoth began without preamble, old enough to have fought your ancestors personally, old enough to have watched worlds burn under their conquest. I came here today prepared to do something terrible because I believed I had no choice. Admiral Youngsik stepped forward. And now? Now I am uncertain, Velmoth admitted. The humans I remember would never have retreated from a winning position. They would have pressed their advantage until either they won completely or were destroyed. You did not do that. Why? Youngsik glanced at Subin, at Taemin's image on the secondary screen, at the faces of the other human commanders. They were all feeling the same thing, the pull of ancient instincts warring with modern conscience. Because we remember what we were, Youngsik said slowly, and we've spent 50,000 years learning to be something else. Yes, the genetic locks are breaking. Yes, we're becoming physically what we once were, but we're not the same species you defeated. We've grown. On Mars, Jiwan had made another discovery in the ancient shipyard. Deep in the facility's core, she found a message left by the last humans before the exile. It was a holographic recording preserved perfectly for 50 millennia. The figure in the hologram looked human, but there was something different about her. She moved with a predatory grace, and her eyes held an intelligence that was almost frightening in its intensity. If you're watching this, the ancient human said, then the exile has ended and you have returned to the stars. I am Commander Haywan, last leader of the Terran Empire. I leave this message as a warning from the past. Jiwan watched, mesmerized, as the ancient commander spoke. We were unstoppable, Haywan continued. We conquered everything we touched. We believed that strength gave us the right to rule, that our superiority justified any action. We were wrong. The galaxy united against us not because they were weak, but because we gave them no choice. We forced them to become strong enough to defeat us. The hologram showed images of the final battles, of Earth's forces being slowly overwhelmed by the combined might of 200 species fighting together. The predecessors gave us a gift when they exiled us, Haywan said, and her voice held genuine regret. They gave us the chance to start over, to grow beyond our need for conquest. If you are watching this, do not repeat our mistakes. Being strong does not mean you must dominate. Being capable of violence does not mean you must choose it. The message ended and Jiwan stood in silence for a long moment. Then she opened a comm channel to Earth Command. I need to speak with Minister Dayun immediately, she said. I have something the Council needs to see. Back in orbit, the standoff continued. The Council fleet maintained its position, weapons powered but not targeting. Earth's forces held their defensive sphere, ready to fight but not attacking. It was a strange moment in galactic history, two forces fully capable of destroying each other, both choosing restraint. Pilot Jae-hoon floated in his fighter, feeling the adrenaline slowly drain from his system. The battle rage that had filled him earlier was fading, leaving behind a cold clarity. He had wanted to fight. Some part of him had been eager for it, had craved the challenge and the violence. Gold leader to gold squadron, he said softly. "How are you all doing?" The responses came back one by one. His pilots were shaken, disturbed by the feelings that had overwhelmed them during the brief combat. They had all felt it. The ancient warrior trying to take control, trying to turn them into weapons instead of people. "We're still us," Jae-hoon said, as much to himself as to his squadron. "That's what matters. We felt the old instincts, but we chose to stay human." Minister Da-eun stood before the council communication channel, with Ji-won's discovery displayed on screens behind her. "High Arbiter," she said, "we want to show you something." "A message from our past." Velmoth watched the hologram of Commander Hae-won, and as he did, his expression changed. "I remember her," he said quietly. "She led the final assault on the predecessor homeworld. I was there when she was captured, when the exile sentence was passed. She left us a warning," Da-eun said, "a reminder of what we were and what we should not become again. Yes, we are regaining our physical capabilities. Yes, we remember how to fight, but we also remember why we lost. We lost because we became monsters and the galaxy had no choice but to stop us." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You came here today to contain us, to make sure we never threaten the galaxy again, but we don't want to be a threat. We want to be partners. We want to use our returned strength to protect, not conquer." Admiral Youngsik added, "We propose a trial period. Let us prove ourselves. Give us the chance to show that 50,000 years of exile taught us something valuable." The council chamber aboard Velmoth's ship was filled with heated debate. Some species wanted to press the attack, to finish what their ancestors started. Others, watching how the humans had fought and then chosen to retreat, were beginning to believe that maybe these new humans were different. Velmoth made his decision. "We will agree to a trial period," he announced. "But understand this, we will be watching. The galaxy will not tolerate a second human empire. If you show any signs of returning to your old ways, we will act immediately and without mercy." "That's fair," Da-eun replied. "We'll be watching ourselves too. Trust me when I say we're as concerned about our own nature as you are." The council fleet began to withdraw, though a small monitoring force remained in the outer solar system. On Earth, celebrations erupted as people realized that war had been averted. But among the military and government leaders there was a more somber understanding. The crisis was not over. It was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the standoff at Earth. 3 months of humanity learning to live with what they had become. The genetic locks had fully dissolved, and every human now possessed capabilities that would have seemed like superpowers just a year ago. Enhanced reflexes, improved cognitive processing, perfect physical coordination, and an instinctive understanding of strategy and tactics. But with those gifts came the constant struggle against darker instincts. Captain Tae-min stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, now leading a joint patrol with council forces in a disputed sector near the frontier. His crew had adapted to their new abilities, but he saw how they struggled. Every conflict, every tense situation, brought whispers from their genetic memory urging domination and force. "Sir, we're receiving a distress call," his communications officer reported. "A colony on the 4th planet. They're under attack by raiders." "Battle stations," Tae-min ordered, and felt the familiar surge of battle readiness flow through his crew. But this time he also felt them working to control it, to channel it properly. The Indomitable dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the colony. 6 raider ships were bombarding the settlements below, their shields raised and weapons hot. In the old days, before the Awakening, this would have been a difficult fight. Earth's technology was still developing, and raiders often had access to illegal military-grade weapons. But now, Tae-min could see the tactical situation with perfect clarity. He knew exactly where to strike, exactly how to disable the raiders without killing anyone, exactly how to end this quickly. The question was whether to use that knowledge. "Captain," his tactical officer said quietly, "we could destroy them all in 30 seconds. They wouldn't even know what hit them." "I know," Tae-min replied, "but we're not executioners. Target their engines only. Let's give them a chance to surrender." The Indomitable moved with impossible grace, its weapons striking with surgical precision. The raider ships found their engines disabled one by one, their shields collapsing under targeted strikes that Earth's old weapons should not have been capable of making. "This is Captain Tae-min of Earth Defense Force," he broadcasted. "You are disabled and surrounded. Surrender peacefully and you will be treated fairly under galactic law." To his relief, they did. On Earth, Minister Daun was dealing with a different kind of crisis. Reports were flooding in from across human space about people struggling with their new nature. Crime rates had initially spiked as individuals felt the pull of ancient aggressive instincts. But they had also seen an increase in people actively working to control themselves, to choose the better path. "We're creating support networks," she explained to the council observers who monitored Earth's progress. "Therapy groups, training programs, meditation centers. We're teaching people to acknowledge the warrior instincts without being controlled by them." Ambassador Hyunwoo, who had returned to Earth, added, "It's like we're all recovering from an addiction we didn't know we had. Every day is a choice to be who we want to be instead of what our genes tell us to be." General Subin had taken a leave of absence from military command to work with Dr. Minji on a project that might change everything. In a research facility in Seoul, they were developing a training protocol that could help humans integrate their ancient abilities without losing their modern conscience. The key, Minji explained to a room full of military officers, is not to suppress the instincts but to understand and redirect them. The warrior mindset that made us conquerors can also make us protectors. It's all about choice and training. She displayed brain scans showing the neural patterns of humans before and after the training. We're literally teaching people to create new pathways in their minds, ways to access the ancient abilities without accessing the ancient aggression. Subin stepped forward. "I've completed the training myself. I can confirm it works. I can still feel the tactical instincts, the combat readiness, but I'm in control. I choose when to use those abilities and how." On Mars, Jiwon had made the ancient shipyard into a museum and research center. Instead of using it to build weapons, humanity was studying it to understand their own history. School groups visited to learn about what their ancestors had been and why they had fallen. "We don't hide from our past," Jiwon told a group of students touring the facility. "We learn from it. Yes, we were dangerous. Yes, we conquered and destroyed. But we also learned from our mistakes. That's what makes us unique." One student raised her hand. "But aren't we still dangerous? We still have all the abilities that made us conquerors." "We are," Jiwon admitted. "Every human alive is potentially very dangerous. But being dangerous and choosing violence are two different things. A person trained in martial arts is dangerous, but that doesn't mean they go around attacking people. We're all learning to be warriors who choose peace." Pilot Jae-hoon had become an instructor, teaching the next generation of Earth pilots. His students learned not just how to fly, but how to master themselves. During training exercises, he watched them struggle with the same instincts he had faced. "You're going to feel the urge to dominate," he told them during a briefing. "You're going to want to crush your opponents to show your superiority. That's normal. That's the old human talking. Your job is to acknowledge that feeling and then make a different choice." One of his students, a young pilot named Bo-ra, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "But what if we need to fight for real? What if being merciful gets us killed?" "Then you fight," Jae-hoon said simply. "We're not pacifists. We're not going to let people die because we're afraid of our own strength. But there's a difference between defending ourselves and seeking domination. That difference is everything." The trial period with the council was coming to an end. In 6 months, the galactic government would vote on whether to fully accept humanity as equals or maintain permanent restrictions on human expansion and military capability. High Arbiter. Velmoth had been watching humanity closely during those months. He had seen the struggles, the successes, and the failures. He had witnessed humans stopping crimes, helping other species, and gradually proving themselves as responsible members of the galactic community. But he had also seen the moments when humans almost failed. The times when individuals gave in to rage, when the old instincts won. Those moments were rare, but they happened. "You're still a risk," he told Minister Da-un during a private conversation. "You may always be a risk." "We know," Da-un replied honestly. "Every species is a risk in their own way. The question is whether we're a risk worth taking." The day of the council vote arrived. Representatives from all 47 species gathered, and the debate lasted for hours. Some argued that humanity had proven themselves. Others insisted that 50,000 years of exile was not enough to erase millions of years of evolutionary programming. Finally, Velmoth stood to cast his vote. As the oldest member of the council and one of the few who had actually fought ancient humanity, his voice carried enormous weight. "I have watched these new humans closely," he said. "I have seen them struggle with what they are. and I have seen them choose again and again to be better than what they were. They are not perfect. They will make mistakes, but they are trying, genuinely trying to be worthy of the power they possess. He paused, his ancient eyes scanning the assembly. 50,000 years ago, we exiled humanity because we could not kill them and could not coexist with them. We hoped that time and isolation would change them. I believe it has. Not because they are weaker or less capable, but because they learned something that their ancestors never knew, that true strength is not the ability to dominate, but the wisdom to choose not to. The vote was close, but humanity was accepted as full members of the Galactic Council. On Earth, celebrations erupted once again. But in the command centers and government offices, leaders like Daun, Young-Sik, and Subin knew that the real work was just beginning. They had proven themselves once, but they would need to prove themselves again and again, every day with every choice. Captain Tae-min received orders for a new assignment. The Council was forming a joint defense force to protect frontier colonies from raiders and pirates. Earth was being asked to contribute ships and personnel. It was a test, a chance to show that human military capabilities could be used for protection rather than conquest. "You understand what this means," Admiral Young-Sik said to him during the briefing. "You'll be representing humanity to the entire galaxy. Everything you do, every choice you make, will reflect on all of us." "I understand, sir," Tae-min replied. "We'll make you proud. We'll make ourselves proud." Ji-won stood in the Mars shipyard looking at the ancient vessels that could have been instruments of conquest. Instead, humanity was beginning to modify them for exploration and rescue operations. The weapon systems were being converted to mining equipment and construction tools. "Is this what they intended?" Kyung-soo asked, gesturing at the peaceful repurposing of the warships. "I don't think the predecessors knew what they intended," Ji-won said. "They exiled us hoping we would change, but they didn't know what we would become. Honestly, I don't think we know yet either. We're still figuring it out." Pilot Jae-hoon took his squadron on patrol, and as they flew through space, he felt the old instincts whisper in,